Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Anuj, and I'm the moderator for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you for taking the time out to attend the Interactive Learning Power Hour session hosted by Harbinger. Today's Power Hour is sponsored by a partner, Domino. You may visit them at www.domino.com. That's www.dominknow.com. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to inform you that Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions hosted by Harbinger, where industry stalwarts share their experiences and insights on a particular topic. The topic for today's discussion is what businesses need to know about gamification in learning. With that, it's time for introduction. Our host for today's roundtable discussion is Dr. Vikas Joshi. Dr. Vikas Joshi is a business leader who is passionate about product development and technology entrepreneurship. His mission is to help create software products that make a difference. A key part of that mission is to inspire tech professionals and entrepreneurs to grow and develop. We welcome you, Vikas. And before I hand over the stage to you, let's play a short introduction video for our audience.
Ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker to ensure it is working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, dial in using phone.
Thank you, Anuj, and big hello to all of you on this lovely morning. We have a great audience today. And an outstanding panel of experts. We do have Paul Schneider, Jean Becker, and Vikrant Nene. And I'm going to introduce them in a bit, but I just want to take a few minutes to set the context of this Power Hour. So here's our game plan. We have an exciting Power Hour lined up for you, and there are 5 key items that we're going to go over today. Number 1, how to build a gamification strategy. 2, developing gamification with the right elements of game mechanics. 3, the benefits and challenges of implementing gamification. The tools that are used in developing gamified content, and finally, demos of some real stuff built using gamified content. So that's quite a bit. But first, I want to set some context by discussing what gamification really is and how it fits into the big picture of the CLO's mandate. So the question is gamification basically the same as learning games, or is it's something different? Let's find out. There are 2 things, game-based learning and gamification, that are often conflated. There are some overlaps, but game-based learning is a type of active learning experience that is couched within a game framework. It takes your core content and objectives and presents these in a game experience, making it fun. Think about Who Wants to Be the Millionaire, or think about Jeopardy. You're playing in a game, and within the context of the game, you are learning something. So you learn new concepts and practice skills in a risk-free setting. It's fun. The progress of the game is directly related to your understanding or your skill. Game-based learning is known to have a significant impact on retention and recall. In fact, that's one of the key things about game-based learning. So quickly, game-based learning is fun, risk-free, and focuses on retention. Gamification is a little different. Gamification is the process of adding the elements of game mechanics to a learning experience. Think points, badges, leaderboards, progress bars, levels, incentives. These are the game mechanics elements. And to add them to content to drive motivation is gamification. It can be as simple as adding levels or progress bars to existing content, but it can also be more complex, like giving points or creating leaderboards for employees. Some common applications of gamification are onboarding, product innovation, elimination of employee errors, collaboration, wellness programs, and so on. The main use of gamification is to foster engagement and to drive motivation. Basically, people have these human needs for collecting, competing, succeeding, and gamification thrives on that. It lets you collect badges, it lets you compete for the leaderboard, it lets you succeed in achieving higher levels. So this is the value of gamification. It takes your current content, it doesn't have to redo it in a game format. It's the same content, but you have elements that introduce motivation and therefore, make it more desirable from an engagement perspective. So those are the few differences between these two. So with that one slide, gamification 101, let's step back and take a broader view and ask ourselves, where does this fit in? Where does gamification fit in the big picture of organizational learning? And to answer that question, we must start by asking ourselves, what are the top priorities of corporate L&D, and which among them is the topmost? And if you look at sorry, some of the game elements are presented here, and I'm sure you're familiar with some of these, progressing to different levels, points, scores, feedback, and so on. So coming back to the big question, this is a survey by Brandon Hall, creating a learning strategy for the future of work. And what we see here is 74%, a full 74% would consider creating a stronger link between learning and performance as their top priority. Now that priority splits into two dimensions. One is engagement and the other is outcomes, right? So you want to look at learner engagement and you want to look at business outcomes. Now there are many different learning modalities, teaching, coaching, videos, e-learning, they all achieve varying levels of engagement and business outcomes. For example, real classroom learning may have one level of effectiveness and sending out slide decks to people may have another. Let's see where e-learning stands on this scale. As you can see, researchers asked the question, how effective are these modalities in engaging learners and achieving outcomes? And they gave a whole list of learning modalities from classroom to videos. You can see the whole list here. As you can see, there's room for improvement when it comes to e-learning modules, okay? It's only 38% effective, and relative to in-person instructor-led classroom, it's probably nearly half as effective or slightly better, okay? So how does gamification help here? How will it help e-learning take this percentage from 38% to a higher level? Again, we come back to both sides of the coin, learner engagement and business outcomes. Research shows that gamification does have a positive effect on engagement. And as you can see from these two hot of the press reports, the first one being a 2021 market share analysis reports. You can see that the outcomes that you can expect from employee engagement, from gamification in terms of employee engagement are there to see. What about business outcomes? You all know about the Starbucks rewards program, right? They posted a significant revenue increase after the Starbucks reward app was launched. And this is a completely gamified experience full of many game mechanics that I described, right? And that's not the only example. After gamifying their store, the floral wire service, Teleflora, gained a significant increase in their Facebook referrals and an impressive conversion rate again. We do know that gamification improves outcomes in retail sales. So why not learning? What's holding us back? Let's do a quick poll here and find out what the audience thinks. If gamification is so wonderful, why do we not see it everywhere? What's holding us back? Let's give it a few seconds and then see where this goes.
Let's give it a few more seconds for the audience. Okay, so shall we end the poll?
Sure.
So sharing the results.
Yes. So as you can see here, and I hope you can see the results, everybody. First of all, as far as the user demographics, meaning, adult learners don't care for gamification, that's not a concern anymore, right? I mean, that's now adequately established that no matter what age, we are inspired by the need to collect, to compete, and to succeed. And so gamification works. The biggest holdback seems to be it takes a long time to develop gamified content. And I think that's something we need to address in today's Power Hour. Tools we use do not make gamifications easy. That's part of our agenda today, and cannot afford the costs of developing high-level gamification. Again, the confusion between games and gamification, it goes back to that. Gamification need not be as complicated as designing games. Cannot afford the costs, same issue. Unsure of the effectiveness, and I think we discussed some of it. So this is a great time now to bring in our panel to address some of these and to move forward. So let's introduce our panelists. We have an amazing panel today. We have Paul Schneider, Senior Vice President, Business Development at dominKnow. Harbinger and dominKnow have worked together for over a decade serving clients in learning and development. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm excited to share more and as well as learn myself.
Sure. Jean is a learning design artist, a keynote speaker, trainer of trainers, human behavior expert, and a best-selling author of 4 books. She's also been voted as L&D Professional of the Year 2020. She comes with 20 years of L&D experience, and it's great to have you here, Jean.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. Awesome.
Most welcome. And we do have Vikrant Nene from Harbinger. Vikrant helps Harbinger customers realize their e-learning vision by exploring new tools and creating proof of concept, proof of value for new solutions. Good to have you here, Vikrant.
Thanks, Vikas, and thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to learn more.
Perfect. So let's get right after it. What makes you interested in this topic? Paul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've been interested in this topic since I started in the e-learning world more than 20 years ago. Like many of us, I have played games in the past and been consumed by them at some point in my life and said, no, time out. I can't do this because it's taking us too much time. But I kind of think back to one of the first games that was a fun game, but a business game. It was called Executive Suite. And the graphics, of course, at that time, I'm a bit older, weren't that great, but it was a fun exploration as you worked your way and made business decisions to get to the top of the executive suite and be the boss. And like I said, it was a lot of fun, but introduced concepts that are still relevant today, even though that game, I think, was developed almost 30 years ago. So that kind of got me interested in, I just love seeing different ways for the learning to be really more effective. Again, the whole purpose of learning is to create change, and game really empowers that, especially for areas where change is more critical for us.
Thank you. Jean?
Yes, so my personal mission is no more boring learning, because I think most of us grew up in the older school systems where the bell would ring, you would drink your milk, you would eat your apple, you would run to the next class, you would be bored for an hour, and then the bell would ring and you'd have to change. And I think there's so much more possible with learning that keeps stimulating curiosity, keeps people on the tip of their toes to really learn more and find out more. And I think everybody around the globe has been pushed so much knowledge, it's been pushed so much inside that people are pretty bored when it comes to learning. So as soon as you hear the word e-learning or training or etc., people will go, oh no, please don't. And I think it's an obligation for us as learning development experts to change the game. So that's my interest. Yeah.
Perfect. Vikrant?
Change the game, yeah. So I guess well-designed games are inherently very engaging and have a great learning experience and have a great effect on learning outcomes. And as Paul said, we all love playing games. I've been doing it since childhood. But I think I can answer, from the team and my role, of course. When I say that, we as a team get all excited about going through the whole experience of building learning games. Building these experiences tests all our capabilities, be it instructional design, visual design, technical skills, and all that. It just gives us a great chance to try out new things and just use our best, I guess, when we are building these games. And just as an off topic, probably it also helps us to learn restraint and balance in learning games, because when we are building it, it's just so easy to go overboard, right? Just for the sake of it. So it just helps us remember that finally, learning is important. The game is a means and learning is king. So I guess that experience is great.
Yes, yes. What an amazing opportunity to bring our talents to this mission of making learning interesting for people. So we have a few questions for Jean to start with. What challenges do you face when it comes to, getting people out of their comfort zone and introducing this eagerness to change and learn? Can you share some of the stories on that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So whenever companies or organizations decide to go for gamification, they are always first hesitant, thinking, will you, belittle our learners because they might not like the game? What does the game look like? And they're worried that it won't be serious learning. So one of the things that we always have to talk about is that learning has to do with getting out of your comfort zone. And the best way for me to illustrate that is with this model. If you look at this model down here, we've got the comfort zone, low comfort and high comfort. And up here, we've got the eagerness to learn. And if you measured it inside a human being, then we all know we want most of our lives to be in the comfort zone, right? We want our health to be there. We want our children to be there. We want, our career to be in the comfort zone because that's where we feel okay. But when it comes to learning, what we know is if we take people out of the comfort zone a little bit, the eagerness to learn and develop goes up. So one of the principles behind actually working with games is making sure that not everybody knows what's going to happen in the game, so that as soon as they're going, oh yeah, we're doing pretty well, it's going well, I think I got it, then at that moment in the game, we can change something, a little bit of the rule, or maybe add some points, or give extra points for something, and then the eagerness to learn goes up. So this principle should always be designed inside of the game, that you have the control as the educator to take a little bit away from the comfort zone, not too much, of course, to make the eagerness and the willingness to learn go up. And I think that principle is very much founded in games, because it's never over, because there's always a new level that you can achieve.
Yeah, that's so interesting the way you put it, because just the desire for renewal and change, it requires a certain degree of willingness to come out of the comfort zone. And the role of games and gamification in that is very critical. Can you give us an example of something that demanded such out-of-the-box solutions from you or your teams?
Absolutely, yes. So we had a country actually that was going to welcome lots of people for hospitality for the Soccer World Championship, and they needed 60,000 new people from around the world to join their country to serve and be in the hospitality for all the football fans that were going to come. And for the people who are in America, that's actually soccer. It's a game you play with your feet. So that's why in the rest of the world, we call it football, but it's a very popular sport. And we wanted to onboard people on both the culture of the country, but also on soccer, football, and we wanted them to learn fast. And I think when you want people to learn fast, to put in little elements of gamification really helps people, as long as you don't make it patronizing or belittling, but make it so that they can be eager. So you've unlocked a whole new level. Only 11% of the people have. You might take a look. You don't have to. Do you want to? Now, that's a question that most people go, well, I at least want to have a look. So we try to offer extra things. We try to offer things like, are you still hungry for more? But we also put in a lot of things that I've learned from the Pokemon principles. What I did when I wanted to get better at gamification was I started to play and get a little bit addicted to Pokemon to see which principles these people were using to have the youth all around the world start moving their bodies. And when I looked at those principles, I've got them behind me here, is one of the things that they do very well in their game. And that's what we've been implementing around the world in lots of, without, of course, using these figures because they would be too childish, but keep them curious for more. So one of the things we always do is that people can already see that they can unlock more knowledge. And by creating some shadows, by saying, oh, you're not yet there, by creating some things that people can be curious for, what else is going to happen to me? So that's one of the things we implemented in there. And we had an increase of retention in knowledge of about 70% compared to the people that we did an A/B testing, that compared to the people that did no gamification, just the e-learning. So that was like so high that we immediately switched everybody to the gamified e-learning, and we were no longer ashamed of gamifying things. So that was a very powerful one where we used that. And we also did hotels who were gamified against their own past, like how many breakfasts do you sell? And we had a game where they could outperform their own past and then compare themselves to other hotels. So are we outperforming our own past, our own history better than other hotels? And even though in the hotel industry, they say we're more of service than of sales, that shot through the roof. So for every euro, we work in euros, that they invested, they got back about 4 euros because of the sales going up, kind of like what happened with Starbucks.
Excellent. Now, one of the pushbacks or criticisms for gamification is that it induces behavior changes that are superficial at best, and they are transitory. In other words, you learn something and you make a change, but that is not a lasting change. Have you encountered that criticism, and what do you have to say to that?
I have encountered it, and I want to make a prediction here that we will still encounter it in the future as well, because I think this is one of the things that people, when they hear about gamification, they think of the children, they think of, I'm not for that, so that little judgment will be there. And I think what gamification does most, and you know, as a psychologist, I think we all know this, is that our brain works best when it's curious. When we feel, you know, this little tension, this tingling of what could be out there, what could be interesting. And I think for many parts of our lives, we're watching 6 Netflix shows in a row. We're not bored, but we're still, you know, in a very monotonous way that we're living. And I think what gamification can do is surprise you every now and then. And we know that as soon as the brain is surprised, it gets more interesting. So our brain is like a pattern finding machine. And as soon as we know, oh, another compliance e-learning, oh no, our brain almost dies. And we know that the retention goes down. So if we can tweak that a little bit and maybe keep the same content, but add some little things that, you know, surprise people, give them an extra reward, something that we know that their retention goes up. So it's actually a very smart move to use gamification, but of course you have to do it right. Does that?
This is again,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go.
Yeah, I was saying this is again a very important point you make. It's adding those little things, those micro interventions that have an outsized effect in terms of how well the learning does. One of the big misconceptions about gamification in the industry is that it's a whole big project. No, it doesn't have to be. It can work with your current existing content. All you have to do is create those moments of anticipation and, you know, curiosity. Now, when you have management requests to build out a course or you know, curriculum or whatever, they rarely take the form of, oh, we need something gamified. I mean, it's usually like a pretty boring kind of thing, right? So how do you align your engaging gamification solutions with these seemingly straightforward management requests? How do you introduce some of your cool stuff inside of what is requested?
I think this also answers a question that I see popping up from an attendee. How do you introduce gamification to baby boomers?
Yeah.
And I think that what we usually do is we don't tell people we're doing a game. It's actually hidden from view. So we don't say we're going to do a gamified e-learning. We just say there's going to be learning happening. But the way we try to get people's attention for the learning has already little elements of games in it. So some people might just be in an e-learning and suddenly it pops up. Do you know what the top 10% of people who are like this say to this question? And this is a pop-up, and I'm going, if the question interests me, and of course that's part of the smartness of the gamification, they might click on it. They might also delete it, but we can learn from that and trigger something else. So I think usually if you do a really good job, people will come out of the learning saying it wasn't boring, it went fast, they have great retention, they might change their behavior, but they haven't felt like it was a game. And I think if we accomplish that, then we are very powerful. Of course, I love games, so I'd like the game to be visible, but most companies don't. I work with hospitals, and if I tell them, let's gamify things, the hospital goes, no games in the hospital, of course. So keeping those elements hidden is, I think, a great power, because otherwise it just sounds childish. And it goes back to where you started with games and gamification. There's a big difference.
That was very well said and very useful, Jean. We'll have you back with more questions. What you mentioned about elements is a nice segue into the next piece, which is for Vikrant to advise us on. What are some of the common elements of gamification that you introduce in learning content as you design your learning to be gamified without making it too obvious?
Well, okay, I think I can think of placing the elements that we generally like to use in about 4 or 5 broad buckets. The first bucket would be immersion, or things to increase the attention engagement of the learner, and again, several ways to do this. For example, we could use personalization, capturing the learner's name right at the start and using that throughout the game. Or we could ask the learner to choose an avatar at the start and use that. I guess avatars were a little low on your scale, Vikas.
Yes.
They also work. Or putting the learner in a thick of the action kind of scenario right at the start with a challenge, that gets their attention. For example, if the game says that, hey Vikrant, you are a manager at a restaurant and there's an emergency and you are responsible for the well-being of your guests, you have to save them. I immediately sit up and take notice, right? I get involved. And again, with these, there are certain other things like a very compelling, engaging storyline or great graphics, great design, that all works together to capture the learner's attention right at the start. The second,
so this is the whole sort of attention grabbing bucket.
Attention grabbing.
Capture the name, introduce an incident, where the story begins, all of that.
Yeah. It would be rewards. I guess we have discussed that. So for that sense of achievement, and though penalties do not work, we can also think of introducing some penalties, some pinch along with that. And again, various ways we could do this. We could have, the learners earning points, or the rewards could be in the form of, say, badges or stars, or time saved or time earned, or people saved, property saved, people helped, or even money earned, right? And again, penalties could be designed in a similar way where you take away what you have learned in a certain way. And generally, since we are talking of learning outcomes, it helps if the rewards and the penalties are closely connected, associated with the real life outcomes, or real life learning outcomes. So that if the game is about maybe safety, then the reward could be in the form of the people you have helped, or the life and property that you have saved. Or maybe the game is about making sound investment choices or good spend decisions. The rewards could be in terms of actual money that you have earned or saved. So that also forms a great case. You can actually even think of, like, if you have a rewards app or something that I think Starbucks you mentioned, we can think of maybe connecting that with the rewards app, so the learners could actually exchange the points they have earned for actual merchandise, and I guess that will be pretty successful. The third bucket would be about competition, introducing competition and edge in the game, and again, this could be done in various ways. So if you have a group, maybe undergoing onboarding or sales training, having a leaderboard in the game, that will get their attention. So everyone can see how they are doing with vis-a-vis their peers or their their fellow learners. Or you could maybe have the learners compete against themselves. Give them multiple chances, give them a chance to better their scores. You could set up the game, design the game so that you are playing against the computer. So every time you get a point, the computer loses a point and you win, and vice versa. So that's also a good strategy that sometimes works pretty well. The fourth bucket would be the game progression that Jean talked about, the way you design your levels or rounds. So we can design the game so that the higher rounds have increased complexity or tougher scenarios, tougher questions, which require the learner to go through multiple learnings that they have done on the way, and where they can apply this. And tougher levels can also mean higher rewards or higher penalties. For example, we can keep the first round very simple. In the second round, we add in the penalties so that the learners really have to think really well before they make a choice. And in the third round, the timer kicks in. So now they are making those choices under pressure. So that works pretty well. And I guess the last bucket would be about the way you give feedback, continuous feedback, immediate feedback that goes a long way. Having something like a performance meter after every question that gives immediate reinforcement or small nuggets of learning, or maybe a live scoreboard where the learners can track their progress, where they are in the game, their awards and winnings, the current status. So I guess those are the buckets in which we like to put the elements that we use generally. And of course, the mix is very important to make it successful. Yeah. But everything works everywhere.
Totally. Does any one of the panelists have an opinion on immediate feedback versus deliberately delayed feedback?
You go, Paul.
Sure. Both of them have great value in providing it. And I mean, all you need to, and I think about, some of the games and like the game I talked about before, and it's how you assemble all things and really make that experience. Think about that executive suite game. That could have been a very boring, here's a concept, here's a quiz question, here's a concept, here's a quiz question, immediate feedback. Well, the immediate feedback's good. And then the way it was wrapped into a story, I got the immediate feedback. So I got the response, I could make choices. I got vaulted up a level or down a level, but then also the different choices, just like life, there may not be, it's not always black and white. So you have different choices that have different levels. And so immediate feedback's great. Oh, what about that? Well, the combination of those gives me a delayed feedback in that accumulated things over that. So I think it's really that combination, and that's where the gaming is. It's kind of the wrapping the story around it and those elements in there. And that's where I think they both have a high impact.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I totally agree with you. From a psychological perspective, we know that if you give a wrong answer and you see that the answer is wrong, there's an immediate cognitive gap. That means that I'm at that moment eager to know, why was that wrong? So if you deliver that feedback immediately, the retention goes up because you've created almost like a make them hungry, because what was my mistake? So especially when it's about retaining knowledge, we always prefer to have, if you have 10 questions, after each question, you know what you did right and wrong, to enforce that answer and to use that cognitive gap. But then, of course, later on, a feedback on the total story of it all, that empowers it very much. So the combination is really great, but I, most of the time, reject options where we ask people like an almost simple question with a simple, clear answer, and then not giving them the feedback immediately. I know the cognitive gap is there. So then I'm almost like, oh, we're wasting retention here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And immediate feedback too, in a gamified experience, you're putting them in an environment where they may pick a choice and not sure. So getting that feedback and go, oh, yes, I guessed right, but that's really why it is right. And yes. And I kind of thought it was there, or I was halfway there. That's extremely powerful.
Now, Paul, do you find customers see gamification as being particularly effective for a specific type of user?
There's, I think back to Gene's point and earlier on, there's hey, our users aren't going to like games or whatever. It's more around, a comfort level of the people who are in charge and who they think of that audience there. And back to, how do you bring those gamification elements in? Because unfortunately, a lot of people, when you say game, they think to the earlier point, oh, this is going to be a Jeopardy game. This is going to be a whatever game. And those are fine. They're really not the best element when you think of gamification. It's what we've been talking about and bringing those elements into the story of what you're trying to communicate. If you turned around and said, hey, would that audience team be better off if they were put into the experience that's just like their job and presented real world problems and real world consequences? And they go, yes, on almost everything. And if you think about gaming, it's doing a lot of those types of things, except that unlike real world, the consequences are artificial and you can learn from them, experience them. and have fun. Just like, you think of the big games, I just think Swords Quest and all those fun things you do. Well, real world, you don't get an extra life and you don't get those extra things out there, and you can't risk yourself emotionally or whatever on that. But in the game, it allows you to and experience that.
Right. Do you want to show us something, maybe a demo of?
Sure. Yeah, I can. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to bring this over and. Oh. There we go. And so I'm going to just show you a couple examples. I'm going to start out with this one right here and move some of the panel off to the right. You just got moved. You didn't feel it, but in the gamified experience there. But one thing, of course, too, is people kind of think, oh, it has to be done a certain way. Well, you can design games in all sorts of different ways, and it can be truly responsive. So they can be playing it on whatever device they have. Think of, people are in retail, whatever experience there. This one brings out a lot of good elements to a situation that applies to a lot of folks. I imagine a few of us have dealt with, hey, I don't have enough time in the day to do whatever it is. And this is a kind of race the clock experience. Some of the things that it really brings in is, it again, makes it very clear about what you're doing. Like any learning, really, you don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of different items. It has scoring, so it's not just right or wrong. We talked about that immediate feedback and delayed feedback. So you're going to get both in this particular experience. And just like the real world, it's not all or nothing. So you have that bring in here. You have your time in this case. In this case, it doesn't force you to have like a countdown clock, but you're earning time or losing time based on your choices. And it's also giving you that idea of progression. How can I get to the end of the day, that meeting, and not be late for that or the other elements in it? And as you come in here, again, you're presented in that scenario, which is a character that I might be helping out with. And so I'm introduced with a person there, and then I get different choices. Again, this brings it into, again, real life. How might I experience? These are the different types of people that I'd be dealing with. And then we can, in fact, I'm not sure if that's the right answer there. We'll go ahead, and she gets feedback. And then here I picked a poor choice there, and it gives me how much time I've spent. I can go on and then come back here with more questions, come back. And as I move through this, it's going to go ahead and hopefully I would start picking some correct choices and move along and build that up. And I'm going to get feedback along that way. Another great example of it, and we talk about the mechanics, is again, what I love about this one here, and I kind of skipped some of the there's some cool videos in there. You don't always have to have videos. And I kind of want to emphasize, when people think about games, and back to Vikrant's point there's all sorts of things the team gets excited about, putting all their skills together. Sometimes you don't have a team with all those skills. You don't need all those elements. And just like any new adventure or task that you're going with, you don't have to do every single thing on your first try. Just putting in a little bit of gaming elements can have a big impact. But in any case, this introduces folks who are working at a fast food restaurant drive-through. We've all been through a drive-through, so we can all kind of relate to this. But the people in that experience, they know it. They're dealing with those folks. So right here, it's introducing me very clearly to the concept. Hey, I'm going to meet some customers. They're going to be at the counter, and there's a whole line of folks. So we need to move through rapidly. At the same time, we need to do things like upsell and make sure they get what they want. And of course, we're going to get points. And there are.
How do you respond? Select the speaker to hear the guest.
So we hear that. We're going to go ahead and listen.
Hi. Can you get me 2 chili dogs, 1 chili cheeseburger, a small Pepsi, and a small fry, please?
Okay. They give us the order, and like the real world, we have several different choices to go ahead and pick from. Yup, and shall I make the hot dogs as original? I mean, you can kind of think which kind of choice is in there. So, hey, we're repeating there. would you like to check the menu? And, you might imagine, hey, I just told you what I wanted. Probably the response you're going to get. I'm going to, put in this here, this, and hey, that's an upsell, but it's reinforcing what they purchased. Good job. I got 5 points for that.
Good job. You did appropriate upselling to your guest.
Give me some immediate
How do you
feedback
respond? Select the speaker to hear the guest.
You might imagine if I hit sure, that's all. We'll go ahead and pick that one here. And again, timers coming in here, give me a little pressure. We can't just waste our time on that. And we'll go ahead. Oh, we got to listen
That sounds
Mm-hmm.
great. Yeah. Make the dogs all beef.
Okay. And we'll get, I can tell you this is probably a bad answer.
Not quite. Remember to be aware of each guest's needs and make informed recommendations to your guests to enhance their meal. How do you respond? Select the speaker to hear the guest.
One of the other things I like about this is, hey, just like real world, I have to move on, and my choice may give me different choices there, or I still have the same choices afterwards, but it had an impact on the overall effectiveness. Back to that immediate feedback as well as delayed feedback because it built on it. And as you see here, it builds all through different things. We're going to meet different guests, different situations. Again, just like the real world story kind of puts you into that. And again, telling a story is something that can be very emotional. And there's back to a question I saw out there. When you bring emotion into it, there's a lot of research that basically says, hey, emotion and memory are highly tied together. And if you can bring that emotion to it, then they're going to remember it more. And again, stories also help tie in emotion.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Vikrant, do you have an example of gamification you would like to share?
Yes, I can skip.
Sorry to interrupt, Vikrant, Vikas. Just a quick time check. We have about 13 minutes.
Yeah, okay, sure. You want to do that?
So I guess
Vikrant?
I can skip.
Okay. Well, so quickly to sort of get ourselves to the point of what we learned today, and I think we learned quite a bit. It's that incorporating gamification in learning can drive both engagement and improve business outcomes. You can implement gamification at scale if you use the right tools, the right game elements, and plan right. And then you can do this kind of gamification using authoring tools such as dominKnow. Paul shared that with you, Storyline, and even custom HTML5, the examples that Vikrant was planning to share. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Anuj, and he can drive the Q&A.
Sure,
Thank you.
Sure, Vikas. So before that, very quickly, okay, let's go to the Q&A. Can you move to the next slide, Vikas? Yeah, just a second. So let's look at the questions. Few of them were already answered. Jean already took a couple of questions. Let's see the other questions here. Yeah, so we have a question from Renee. The question is, what software was used to develop these games? So Paul, you gave the demo. Would you like to take that question?
Sure. Yeah, Domino 1 was used to develop both those games. Domino 1 enables you to kind of do a fixed pixel type design, which sometimes is more appropriate for games. In that particular case, the designers chose to make them responsive so they could use it on all sorts of different devices. Really, when you're looking at software, you need a couple elements. Key for that software is, does it support the ability to have, lots of different actions and triggers so people can make decisions? Does it support the ability to have variables to remember things for that delayed feedback as well as immediate feedback? And in that particular case, it also had built-in timers, which, as somebody pointed out, can be anxiety provoking, but as you might imagine, the job itself is anxiety provoking. So that's why that is in the case where the other one, which was about time, didn't have timers because that wasn't the focus. It was about building that up. But yeah, you want to look for a solution that has at least those types of elements to build it. But dominKnow 1 was used for both those.
Great, great. Thanks, Paul. Another question from Sabine. If you hide the fact that your product is gamified for boomers, don't you lose your USP? And how do you communicate that asset as in your marketing? So Jean, you want to take that?
Sure, yes. There's usually different audiences, right? So if you're a company that sells learning, you of course want to advertise that you have gamification inside, and that you do that to create better results, because you don't do gamification because gamification, you do gamification because it creates better results, right? So sometimes that means that for me, it means that my L&D friends inside my client's company, they know about the gamification, but they know that the people who are actually going to be doing the learning, they might not like that, or they might, feel a little bit weird about that. So then we do put in the elements, we do tell the directors and everybody why we're doing it and how we're going to measure the impact of it, but we might not reveal it to the learners themselves. Now, if we work with T-Mobile and we have very young learners and they're very enthusiastic, then if you don't put gamification stamp on there, they might even go, I need to throw up because I need to learn. Whereas the next moment they go on their TikTok and try to become TikTok famous, which is also learning, but gamified learning. So it depends on the audience whether you reveal the gamification or not. I hope that.
Got it. Absolutely. So I'll take the next question. It's from Hania. What are the best questions for gamification of the skills of using softwares like Microsoft Office, for example? So how could you use gamification in kind of simulations, if I assume the question is right? Vikrant, you would like to take that question?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I'm having some problem. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll repeat it. So the question is, what are the best questions for gamifications of the skills of using softwares like Microsoft Office, for example? So what I'm assuming is the question is, how do you use gamification in software simulation training? Show me, try me type. Is my understanding correct? Panelists could jump in.
So I guess we have a lot of games where we can have it as a try me. For example, if you are talking about training on Microsoft Office or any applications, we could do it as a let me try or as an assessment. In gamified learning, typically we are adding these gamified elements on top of the learning. So at the base, it could still be a simple let me try, but then we can have so many gamified elements on top of it. We could have the point system. We could have, if it's a let me try, add in a timer, because we want us to be efficient, right?
Exactly.
So, we can have all those elements that we talked about, that we saw on any application training, on any let me try, and still make it pretty effective.
Got it. Another question: is gamification expensive? How can I justify my budget allocation for gamification to the decision maker? So the expensive part, which Vikas spoke about. Vikas, you would like to take that question? How do you justify the, first of all, is it expensive? And if yes, how do you justify it to the management?
Yeah, it's a standard issue about price, right?
Right.
Price is always seen in relation to cost. If you do not buy something, what does it cost you? And therefore, how much is justified to be paid in the tools and the services and solutions to avoid that expense? I think the argument has to be always in terms of, how much you gain on the top line, or how much you gain in terms of efficiency, how much you gain in terms of avoided staff turnover, how much you gain in terms of productivity as a result of launching an effective learning program. And then what's the value of that vis-a-vis the cost of it. And there's always going to be that discussion where there's a bit of arm waving and there is a bit of spreadsheet. So as they say, you need to be good at both, the spreadsheets and the storytelling. You need to be able to do both. I'll defer to other panelists about justifying the costs of gamification. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll jump in too. Just in terms of that, I won't talk about justifying it because I think you nailed a little bit there, but it's not always expensive. And what you put into it, really you want to put in as much as, back to your point of the impact it's going to make. But, when we think of gamification, we always think of these, games that, quite literally millions of dollars were spent to make a game that we come out there. You can put in very simple elements. You don't have to have every single thing, even from the projects I showed, which are pretty awesome. They weren't millions of dollars or anything to go ahead and build those. But you can put in simple elements, like one of our customers took something that normally would have just been a quiz at the end. Instead, they divided the quizzes into the core objectives that they were trying to teach. And then very simple graphics built around it and showed you how many points you got around what you were trying to do. And then gave you a chance to go ahead and try that again. And so some simple feedback, some very simple game mechanics probably cost them maybe 5 more hours worth of development, if that, and made it a lot better experience than just the quiz at the end. Right. And that was just a small item. So you can add a lot of these little elements throughout and have a much bigger impact with a very small cost too.
Right. So the idea is that need not be the entire course is gamified, but parts of it, the quizzes or could be gamified to create it much more impactful.
Yeah, with some small tweaks to the way you approach it or wrapping a little bit of story around it. Right. It will take a little more effort, but not of the effort that you're going to have to go ahead and get new budget approval or new time approval.
Got it. Thanks, Paul. So another question from Arindam: are there any taxonomies that we can use for gamification? Any of the audience panelists? I'm sorry, to take that. Any taxonomies?
Oh, I'm not sure how to sort of interpret that question. Mm-hmm. The gamification framework that Harbinger uses has an exhaustive list of game elements. And it's those elements that we divide into 5 buckets, as Vikrant described earlier. And we pretty much talk in terms of those element types and categories. Beyond that, I'm not aware of taxonomies. Jean, you had your hand up for the earlier question as well. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think that whenever I'm trying to sell gamification, because I know it works better, I go back to science and I show research, but also my own development that I've done to show what is the return on learning or the return on investment whenever you do learning. And we all know, of course, the forgetting curve of Ebbinghaus. And we know that if we add meaning to something, we're beating that forgetting curve. And usually when you look at the very old-fashioned e-learning, we would take a book, put it in a computer and ask some questions about it. And that is the old boring learning that doesn't add any meaning and spices basically to learning. So I always use some principles when I'm working with people, when I want them to buy the gamified option, to go, what are the principles of learning that we all believe in? What does the research say? And how does that make this budget needed? And that's usually the best way to go. And then, of course, you can go mega gamification, but that's the point that Paul already made, or you can do small things. Yeah.
Great.
Got it.
Thank you. So I think we are almost out of time. Few more questions unanswered, but we'll be sure to email our responses from our panelists to all those open questions. Very quickly, please allow me to give a brief about Harbinger. So, Harbinger Learning has been in business since 1990. So from the last more than 30 years, we have kind of witnessed the evolution of e-learning. From the early 90s, when enterprises and companies were looking to use computers to train people and employees, and simultaneously cut down on the training spend, because trainers had to travel or employees had to travel or book hotels, etc. So we have seen the early days to fast forward today when we are witnessing a lot of use of software technology in e-learning. So you could talk about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, or augmented reality, or certain software frameworks to make development or modernization easier. So Harbinger is a company that has seen everything, and we are the ones who also introduce newer concepts to the market, or kind of adapt to newer concepts. It could be things like experiential learning or competency-based learning, etc. So when you work with Harbinger, you will experience our focus on delivering unique learning experiences, and that too by significantly optimizing your training spend and reducing your development time. Just to brief you about where Harbinger stands in terms of statistics, we are a team of 800 plus professionals that includes 150 plus e-learning producers. So we are kind of small enough to care and large enough to deliver. Harbinger has dual shore operations in US and India. We have offices in US as well as in India, and we work with clients across multiple industries. And we also, work for off-the-shelf training providers or catalog training providers. So that was a little bit about Harbinger. So you could drop us a line if you need a one-to-one conversation with us or a demo with us. We provide end-to-end custom content development, modernization, learning technology services and solutions, etc. And we have also included in the chat, the email address that you could send your query to or set up a demo. And we also welcome you to send, connection requests to our panelists. Their LinkedIn profile links is mentioned in the chat, and you could also directly have a communication with them. So we are out of time. So once again, thank you very much, Vikas. Thank you, Jean, Paul, Vikrant, everyone, for such an intriguing conversation. We are sure that everyone will have some food for thought today. And we also thank our audience for joining in large numbers, and we hope to stay in touch with you. Thank you so much, and have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks, Anuj. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.